In 1850, China's territory roughly extended to this area. 10 years and 3 treaties later, China lost a territory the size of 10 Taiwans to Russia. Fast forward to now, and China and Russia seem like close allies, and their border issue appears as settled as it can possibly be. But is it really? Well, new evidence suggests China might want to reclaim those territories and even aim to turn Russia into its own Canada in the process. In this video, we will first explore why China might try to regain its northern Manchurian territories from Russia. Next, we will consider counter-arguments for those who find this idea absurd. And lastly, we will share our informed opinion on why this topic is worth watching in the coming years. But first, let's take a step back and look at that border history. Two men are chatting about US-Vietnam policy when suddenly one of them asks, "Will, what would the US do if the Soviet Union attacked and destroyed China's nuclear installations?" This was Boris Dadov, second secretary of the Soviet embassy in DC. The other man was William Stearman, special assistant for North Vietnam for Henry Kissinger. This real conversation reveals how close China and Russia came to nuclear war in 1969. And this war sparked exactly from their land dispute border. You see, some 160 years ago, China's territory extended much further north, including parts of modern Russia, such as Vladivostok, which means the ruler of the East. However, during the 1860s, China's military and economy were critically weakened after decades of wars. During this time, European nations weakened China's territorial sovereignty. China signed the so-called unequal treaties that forced it to give up large territories to European countries. The most well-known examples are Hong Kong and Macau, which went to the United Kingdom and Portugal, respectively. Tsarist Russia also seized this chance to expand into China, establishing the borders we know today with the Treaty of Amur in 1858 and the Convention of Peking in 1860. 100 years went by, and China regained many of its former territories, including Hong Kong in 1997 and Macau in 1999. Still, a few lingered on, notably those taken by Russia, which are, by far, the largest territories lost to a European power. Some may argue this is a 160-year-old issue, long archived in the pages of history. Except, it's not. And that's for 3 reasons. First, as recently as 1969, China and Russia had a border dispute related to these territories. It was so bad, in fact, that the Soviet had to ask the US if it was okay to bomb Chinese nuclear facilities. Though the conflict began in 1969, the peace treaty was only officially signed in 2008, when Russia had to give up full sovereignty over some islands on the Amur River. Also, as shown on this landmark on Zhenbao Island, where the main battle happened, this clash is considered by the Chinese as the first complete victory in a century against a European power. Second, a leaked Russian intelligence document shows strong evidence of China's ongoing interest in these territories. This report, published by the New York Times in June 2025, raises concerns that academics in China have been invited to research historical claims of ancient Chinese peoples in Russia's Far East. And lastly, of course, geography plays a key role in the China-Russia relations. China and Russia share a 2,600-mile-long border,
the 5th longest in the world.
While countries argue over physical borders, the internet has no boundaries. This makes it easy for hackers, phishing sites, and malware to target anyone. But NordVPN can be your first line of defense. It not only encrypts your connection, but it actively protects your browsing. It blocks most harmful malware, prevents zero-day phishing attacks, and even spots fake online shops before they can steal your credit card info. A feature I use personally is the Onion over VPN, which masks your IP through multiple servers. Even its basic tier has a dark web monitor that alerts you if your email has been leaked. One more thing I love about it is that you can log into the same account on up to 10 different devices, including smartphones, computers, routers, and even some TVs. If you visit nordvpn.com/kamome, you can get a big discount on a 2-year plan plus 4 extra months. You can try any plan risk-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So go ahead and take control of your online security today at nordvpn.com/kamome. The link is in the description as usual and the pinned comment. Now, let's return to that Manchurian border dispute. This border is crucial to their friendly ties, with pipelines and freighters moving along it. However, it has also been a battleground in many past conflicts. Historically, whether the border served as a gateway for trade or as a battleground kind of depended on the balance of power. When Russia was stronger, it expanded into parts of the Qing Empire. But what about now, as the balance now shifts in China's favor? Well, if we look at it from China's perspective, the former northern Manchuria territories in Russia are essential for 3 main reasons. First, they ensure the security of northern China and Beijing. Second, they allow control over North Korea. And lastly, they support force projection in the Sea of Japan. If we look at a map, we will notice a key feature of China's geography. A corridor of flat land under 600 meters high links the vulnerable North Chinese plains and Beijing with modern-day Russia to the north and the Korean peninsula to the south. The Japanese Imperial Army used these flatlands to enter mainland China in the 1930s. Less than 2 decades later, in 1945, during Operation August Storm, the Red Army invaded these lands to push the Japanese back, seizing industries and machinery and sending them to Russia in that process. An invasion from this corridor was feared even after World War II. Communist China's leaders feared a land invasion from Russia's Far East and Outer Mongolia, which is less than 500 kilometers from Beijing at its closest point. In 1966, Zhou Enlai, Communist China's Henry Kissinger, went as far as saying, "North China may be the enemy's main direction of attack. North China must be prepared as the main battlefield." Coincidentally, flat territories are a major weakness for contemporary Russia. The northern European plains connect the Atlantic Ocean to the Urals, historically enabling invasions by France, Sweden, and Germany. A second major point of concern for China is the proximity of nuclear weapons to its main cities, and there are quite a lot of them. China has the highest number of nuclear-armed neighbors. Let's see. India, Pakistan, Russia, and North Korea all share borders with China and are all nuclear-armed. However, only one country has nuclear missiles less than 500 miles from Beijing, and that's North Korea. China has 2 main interests regarding North Korea. First, it must ensure those nukes are never aimed at its cities. Obvious. Second, it needs North Korea's nuclear arsenal as a deterrent to keep regional adversaries like South Korea, Japan, and the US far from its northern regions and the Yellow Sea. To achieve its goals, China must fully control North Korea. The problem is that, despite common belief, it doesn't. The main variable in the China-North Korea relationship is in fact Russia, which shares a land border with North Korea. If China recovers its former northern Manchurian territories, it would push Russia out. This would make China North Korea's only bordering country, besides South Korea. But some may say, hang on, isn't China the only lifeline to North Korea? Don't they already have enough power to achieve their strategic goals? Yeah, well, it's not that simple. Although China accounts for 98% of trade with North Korea, Kim Jong-un stated in 2023 that Russia, not China, is the country's #1 priority. Why is that? Well, simply put, both Russia and North Korea want to avoid being dominated by China and used against each other to balance out against Beijing. North Korea relies on China for 98% of its trade, while Russia depends on it for 40%. By cooperating militarily, they can reduce Beijing's economic power and shift focus to security. The problem there for China is Russia's 17-kilometer land border with North Korea, which is also its shortest. Despite its length, this border is vital as North Korea supports Russia in the war of Ukraine. Through this border, Pyongyang sends ammunition and soldiers to the front lines of Ukraine. At the same time, Russian advisors and technology help North Korea improve its nuclear and ballistic missile capabilities, which are so uncomfortably close to those Chinese cities. So from China's standpoint, cutting off Russia's access to North Korea would give it complete control over its militarized neighbor, with nukes less than 500 miles from its capital and a dozen cities with over 1 million people. If the US faced a similar situation, it would deal with an armed-to-the-teeth Canada with nuclear missiles stationed near Toronto and Montreal, ready to strike Washington at Justin Bieber's whim. So, for China, reestablishing its pre-1858 borders would really help to achieve these three main goals. First, ensure that Beijing and its major cities are safe from North Korea's nuclear weapons, and that Russia is out of Asia's Far East. Second, use North Korea as leverage in negotiations with the US, especially concerning regional security. And third, keep Japan and South Korea in check. Now, one last reason why China is interested in regaining these territories is to expand into the Sea of Japan. For decades, China has sought access to these waters. Only 17 kilometers separate China's nearest port from the sea. From China's perspective, accessing the Sea of Japan offers one key advantage. It broadens its strategic options against the United States. First, it creates an extra area of responsibility, an AOR, for US forces. This AOR spans from the Korean Strait in the south to the Tartar Strait in the north, and from Vladivostok in the west to the Kuril Islands in the east. This requires the US to allocate significant forces here, instead of along the first island chain or near Taiwan. Next, the Sea of Japan gives Chinese warships and submarines an alternate operating area. The South China Sea and the East China Sea are shallow and busy. The US, Japan, Australia, and South Korea maintain strong naval forces in these waters, keeping China's navy in check. So, it's critical for China to shift regional adversaries' focus from its naval centers of gravity in the South and East China Seas to the Sea of Japan. Lastly, the Sea of Japan is quite deep, which offers a significant advantage for China's submarines, which will struggle in the shallows of the East and South China Seas. This positioning brings them closer to US bases in Korea and Japan, while also serving as a launching platform for China's ballistic submarines, which would be closer to the continental United States. Despite all potential gains, at face value, modern China and Russia seem to have a strong relationship, right? The main counter-argument for why China wouldn't want to take over Russia's Far East is their shared interests. Although they've both had border clashes in the past, these interests now bring them closer together. Ironically, these common interests revolve around borders and economic security. Both countries see their frontiers as insecure, leading them to challenge their status quo. They prefer direct control over their security rather than forming alliances like the US. If the US has alliance treaties all over the world, although we don't know how long that'll last, China only has an alliance treaty with North Korea. Unlike the US, which is a sea power, Russia and China don't really trust their neighbors. And this is bad news if you share the longest and most numerous land borders in the world. This has led to the current situation where China and Russia are involved in multiple territorial conflicts. Just to mention the most relevant, Russia has invaded Ukraine and Georgia, while China disputes territories with Taiwan, India, Japan, South Korea, and several other nations in the South China Sea. Given these ongoing conflicts, we can kind of see why Russia and China are aligned here. They share an interest in avoiding a conflict between them which could threaten their already open conflicts. When they fought each other in the past, it created long-lasting weaknesses. After the Sino-Soviets split in the 1970s, Russia and China militarized their 4,000-kilometer border. Maintaining such a lengthy border required vast resources, contributing to the Soviet Union's downfall. This militarized border drained about a third of its military power. So both countries must focus on their current fronts, as they are resource-intensive. In Ukraine, for example, Russia is fighting an offensive war that is estimated in the $200 billion ballpark. In the South China Sea and the Hainan Island alone, China is believed to have spent over $50 billion on military facilities. This exceeds the total value of U.S. military infrastructure in Hawaii. The highest costs of multiple open fronts are one of the main reasons some argue China benefits more from using Russia than from forcefully reclaiming its former territories. The China internet calls this the Canadification of Russia. Alternatively, we could call Russia China's Belarus. But anyway, the main argument here is that by making Russia reliant on China's economy, Beijing can then influence Russia to meet its strategic goals. This mirrors how Canada is the U.S. top trading partner and a key part of its defense system, like NORAD. So this strategy allows China to achieve three objectives. First, better protect its airspace by sharing radar signals, intelligence, and early warnings. Second, to be sure to protect Beijing and China's north. And third, to use Russia's northern sea route and its Arctic infrastructure. The problem for Russia is that that power gap is widening. The war in Ukraine has shown Russia's weakened military capacity, and it has depleted its forces. Plus, Russia must focus on its European side, spreading its remaining military resources thin across the country. Meanwhile, China's military is only growing, investing in new technologies, potentially giving it a future advantage. Another benefit for China is access to Russia's Arctic Ocean side to expand its trade routes. Using the Northern Sea Route, NSR, cuts a 40-day journey to Europe via the Indian Ocean Suez Canal down to roughly 20 days, which also allows the planned access to the Arctic, utilizing Russian infrastructure in the region. One more argument why China might not forcefully take over Russia's territories is that China hasn't always gone to war over border disputes. In some cases, it has approached them based on convenience and beneficial situations. In the 1962 Sino-Korean border argument, China gave North Korea the tallest peak of Mount Baekdu. In 1964, they went even further, where they handed over 400 various river islands. The takeaway being that China has, in some cases, tried to settle its territorial disputes peacefully. So, will China invade Russia? Like many things, it depends. First, timing matters. Both Russia and China have autocratic governments. Although they aren't worried about elections, power transitions are usually more violent than in democracies. In Russia, this is especially true. If the Chinese Communist Party's core is Xi, then there is still bureaucrats and hierarchies inside its system. In contrast, power in Russia revolves around only Putin. How power shifts here will be key. It will affect how Russia handles Chinese pressure and its own survival. Second, Taiwan and Ukraine are both more immediate concerns for the countries. How these issues get resolved will be crucial. If China acts and fails, Russia might help cover the defeat. If it successfully conquers the island, it will embolden them. Third, the China-Russia power balance is vital. In the 1860s, the balance heavily favored Russia. Now, it tilts towards China while Russia is focused on Ukraine. It's only a matter of time before China dominates this relationship. Yet, we don't really expect this to happen soon. However, history can accelerate when no one is paying attention. Conditions change, alliances weaken, and what seems unlikely today can become inevitable almost overnight. This analysis offers insight into China-Russia relations. It also encourages critical thinking. With the same information, you can form your own ideas and analysis, and if you want, share them here in the comments or in that secret Discord chat that we've got. We've listed all the resources Lewis and I used in this video research, and you can find them down in the description. As always, thank you for watching. Ciao.